Well, as you can see, we get a quick start here um, with a Statenbijbel in some pretty bad condition and held together by duct tape. Statenbijbels were made in the early 1500s, the first ones uh, in the Netherlands, and kind of a codification of the language and the religion at the time. And this one's only about 100, 120 years old, I think. The text is in disappointingly good condition, but the parts where you've got pictures and birth dates and death dates was in bad shape. So trying to be very professional here with a brush and brushing things off. And of course, got to use a heat gun to get the tape off. And consistently keeping my hand in front of the heat gun so that I wasn't going to run any risk of delaminating the Bible, or pulling something off, or burning Bibles outside. So this took a while. We were in pretty much 400% speed here, and it's still taking a long time to get that first piece off. And there were many pieces of this. Once we got that off, you can also see why it was put on. Really bad shape here, and all this has to come off so that when we put on the new stuff, it really has something nice to stick to. And this letter in the front was going to have to come up, and it's a very, very delicate operation to do that. But it worked out fine. And here I'm trying to get off some of the residual glue and things like that, just to make it smooth. So now these pages that have the pictures and things like that on it, and I found this one, and as I pulled it up, I could see that there were other pictures under there. They didn't have any writing next to them. They weren't identified. But it was a real shame that they were glued down to the page and, threatening to be lost to history. So very carefully with this, probably Teflon. They originally boned this tool that I'm using here, but it's probably some sort of Teflon or plastic. But it allows you to gently pry things up or smooth things out. Great overall tool to have if you're messing with a Bible like this. But look at all these little treasures I found on the back there, just completely hidden. So as I learn more and more about working with books and antiques, I know that I need to stabilize them when I can, and take my time. Really, we're using an X-Acto knife. I'm not sure that was the best thing to use, but getting these pictures up otherwise was going to be impossible. I couldn't really put any acetone on that heavy-duty glue, not even from the other side, because there were photos there. The lesson learned here is never use heavy-duty glue. If you're going to put them down, use these little stickers like I've got here. These are just photo stickers, and it's all reversible. You can get it up pretty easily, but it's strong. Now this is where I had the most trouble. This is a couple of pages with lots of pictures, lots of dates, clearly being looked at many times. Huge holes. There's a tear in the top of the page, a huge tear, but just held on by a couple millimeters of paper. Gigantic hole in the middle, a couple other holes just right. And this was my opportunity to learn how to repair holes in paper and go through that whole process. But first we have to get everything aligned and get everything ironed, because the wrinkles and creases in here have been there for 1,000 years, it seems, and getting all of that just right so that you could then go in and repair it. And here I'm just taking a damp piece of paper, kitchen roll paper, and just gently, lightly going over the top and not getting it really wet, but just a little bit on there, and it flattens right down. This is also a moment when things tend to tear off. They've been bent and weakened, and you got to be careful not to remove anything. You want to keep, or at least I wanted to keep, as much of the original paper as possible. Here I'm going to start working on getting these holes fixed. That hole in the middle is closed up nicely. It was just ripped apart, and then the paper was just folded back. And it just takes some time and a little bit of patience. Now here we'll start gluing, and one of the things I needed to do was to cut with this needle. It's a needle with a handle on it. Just go around the hole with a piece of old paper that I had found in an old book and scratch out the shape, then go back over it, and then gently tear it out of the paper so that it's got some, the fibers on the edge are ready to be glued and will set themselves nicely on the remaining paper. I think I'm taking a sandpaper block here and just scuffing it up a little bit. It doesn't make that much difference because I'm going to be putting some cloth or some paper tape over the top of it. So once this gets in there and it gets glued, which is what I'm doing now, and then we'll take that, smooth it all down, get it just in the right place, smooth it all down. That glue goes very quickly, starts to bind, get it all smoothed out, and then put on some of this paper tape. Now here's something I realized, and this is what all the real restorers do. They put the tape down first, and then they start to color in. And you can see, maybe you can see there that I had already started to color things back in before putting the tape on, and that was just dumb. So I knew I should do that. I just didn't think about it, and the repair looked okay, but it also bled through the paper. Luckily, it didn't bleed through on anything. So these 2 pages took me the most time of any part of this Bible, and so they get the honor of more time in this video as well. Wasn't really sure what was happening with this sort of overlapped paper here, but I didn't want to take it out, so I just glued it down, just using normal wood glue. I think it's called PVC glue. And if you really wanted to get this back up, you could do so with some heat and moisture, and that would come back up. Unlike some of the glue that was used in to put these pictures in, which you have to take acetone to get it even loosened up a bit. So here I'm coloring in some of the lines. It's a brown color. I'm using black, and I'm not using it so that I try to make it look perfect. I'm putting this on there, and just so your eye flows over it. If you look at it, you'll see it. But I'm just taking away that your eye falls to it. And in retrospect, I should have done all of this and just gone out and bought a brown pen. But that's something I have to. That's something I have to live with from now on. So the edges on all of these pages, very brittle. When you look online and you see people repairing pages, it's a tear in a page. Here I was working with 15 tears in a page, and putting this this paper tape along the edge. It's very hard to see if you get it put down. That's I'm putting some there. If you really press it down well, it's very hard to see, and it gives a lot of good strength to the page. In retrospect, I might have been better off fixing all the tears with some glue and then going back and doing all the edges of the paper with the paper with the paper tape. But anyway, learning as I go. This is a picture of my neighbor's father, and somebody has put glue on top of the picture, and I just using mechanical means to get that off, just scraping it off. It didn't work very well, but I got the biggest parts off. Here's a huge chunk of the opening page of this beautiful Bible, just ripped off. And so again, putting the paper under there, taking that needle, going through, making sure everything's weighted down and not moving. It took me a few years to learn that one. And then carefully scratching out a shape that will conform to the tear, will nicely fit, and so the glue works well, and then the paper tape will also go over this. Unfortunately, I didn't match the colors, right? I couldn't match the colors very well, so there's still this sort of scar there, but at least the page's integrity is intact, and if you wanted to spend a lot of time on it, you could make it perfect, but that wasn't going to happen here. Again, retracing it so that you can just tear it out of the paper. I found this paper in the back of an old book I had on ships, and so I just took out one of the back pages that I was never going to use anyway, and well, it was for this good cause. So I just took it out, cut it out, and now we've got our piece of paper that is pretty flush with the page. That'll get glued up, and we'll put the paper tape over the top of it. pretty fiddly work. Really big piece. Again, if you look online and you're trying to find instructions on how to do this, it's usually like a little bite out of the side and something. But this was really big and rather problematic. Here comes the paper tape. Great stuff, magic stuff. I'm back to using that bone folder, that white tool. It really makes a difference. I couldn't, with my fingers, I couldn't get everything smoothed down and really stuck. But with the bone folder, you could. Here's where a picture was put on there with heavy-duty glue, and I'm just used acetone to get the actual picture. There was an envelope, actually. And here I'm just trying to scrape away some of the glue so that you can read the letters under it. It was going to be impossible just to get it off without really damaging the page. So just scraping this off just so you can read the letters, and it's good enough. So now we're working on the spine and getting all of this ripped up, old, cracked, broken paper out of the spine. And I'm going to put some Japanese washikozo paper on there, the very long fiber, just to give it a better base. So all this is going to come off of the book spine and also the leather part there. Got to get all of that off. It was really stuck on there. Lots of glue, really hard glue. At one point I'm using a sandpaper just to start sanding it down because it's just too hard for me to take with my X-Acto knife and get it off. These little ends that I'm taking off here, I see, they make the end look a little nicer. Since I'm going to be using linen book tape, it doesn't make that much difference. But they were in too bad a shape to save, which I do see from some of the professionals online. And now we're going to the edges of the books. They get really frayed, and just taking some wood glue and a palette knife and getting some glue on the palette knife and sticking it between the layers, and then clamping that down, and then you've got a pretty nice edge. You'll see at the end of the video I put some protectors on the corners. Everything's scraped down, and now I take a brush and I put a liberal amount of glue, wood glue, on the spine. And I've got this washikozo paper I'm going to put on there. I left that brush there and forgot about it, and the next day I came across it, and it was as hard as a rock. But little tip, if you put it in a glass of water for a couple hours, you can get that glue back out. So here's that bone folder again, really an indispensable tool for making sure that the contact points are correct and everything's glued down properly. I put a little bit of plastic there, a towel, and now I'm going to put some weight on top of this so that it gets stuck down. Now I'm touching up with it's actually a furniture pen, but I'm touching up the color. A lot of the color lost around the edges, just worn off, just from use. And there's quite a lot of it. This book is covered in fabric and pressed in some places, that the black design on there, and then of course the embossed with the Bible, the word Bible there, and then I assume it's gold paint. I'm using a gold paint pen here to touch up little bits and pieces. I could have done it all, but I thought, I'm not gonna. I was just afraid of making it a little bit less nice than it was, so I just did a little bit. Now here's the back. Lots of water damage here. The fabric has come up. It just needs to be glued down, and so I did this step by step, taking a palette knife and driving it under there with glue. All that worked really well. I did learn something though. When you do this, you can put too much pressure on these things. That's not too much pressure, that little 2.5 kilo weight. But later I was clamping it, and it distorts it slightly. So it's back down, but it's distorted. Here my lovely wife is helping me sew back in that 2 pages that I spent so much time on. And so it was affixed better than maybe just putting paper tape on it there. And it takes some strength to get it through. So in the end, I just grabbed it with some pliers and pushed it through. I think here they're pliers, but I think you do have to be careful on the other side where we tied it off. That if you're really doing a professional job here, that doesn't leave a knot back there and then show up under the spine under the binding on the spine. So in this case, we're not working to those kind of tolerances, but looks good. It looks a lot better. It was slightly off, just slightly. But it was a lot better than what it was, and that looks fine. So we got all that done, and now we're taking, this is linen book binding tape. It's great stuff, but as you put that on there, that white on the bottom, that sticky stuff, does start to leach through. So as you're pulling on it and stretching it a little bit, the white does start to come through, and that's too bad. My solution for that was to go over all the tape again with a permanent black marker, and not really coloring the fabric, the linen, but coloring the adhesive that tends to leak through. As it leaks through and your hand goes over it, then you smear it a little bit, so you get these kind of cloudy places of adhesive, and it's got to be something you can do about that. But anyway, and I just recolored all the linen bookbinding tape, and it didn't take 15-20 minutes to do. Here at the end, I'm drilling little holes. Usually you do this with screws. I've decided to use the tops of brass nails to hold it down and just cut them off to 3 millimeters. And I'm using epoxy glue. So just getting a little epoxy glue on there, on these tiny little brass nails, getting them in there, pushing them down, and that will be on there. If some kid comes along and lifts the edge of that, you could tear it right off, but it's pretty robust. It's on there pretty well, and will protect those corners, and adds a nice little aspect to the Bible. Let's see, pop out there. You can see the back there where I was repairing that, where I had come completely loose, and then also gone over it with furniture coloring to get the color back. I didn't go through all of the places where it was worn, just where it was, pretty much worn through. You can also see on the spine that sort of whiteness on there, and that's that adhesive coming through. And in the final version here, that's being taken out. Well, there it is. That's it, completely done. It was a joy to do.